Okay guys, so today we're going to start with 2.4, what is a linear function? Okay, a function is linear if the rate of change, aka the slope, is constant between any two sets of points. Okay, and the equation that we're going to be using very often is y equals mx plus b, so we need to understand what what the m and the b stands for. M is your slope, which is the rate of change. Those mean the same thing. B is your y-intercept, aka your starting point. Alright, I'm not quite sure why I have this, but these are both constant. It's a constant rate of change. Okay, so one way you can find a rate of change, aka the slope, is the change in, remember this means y, over the change in x. So another way you might want to see change is a little triangle. That symbol means change, so the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so on example 1, little Jimmy is saving money to buy a new toy. He already has $2, but will save $3 every week. Okay, so remember, m is your slope. How is his money changing every week? Well, he's adding $3 to it every week. So I know my rate of change is 3. B is your y-intercept. That's your starting point. Well, I know he started with that $2, so it's going to be a plus 2. So to fill out my table, one, I could graph it and open the table to check it out, but let's go ahead and plug our x's in and see what goes for each of those. So if I plug in x is 0, that's going to give me 2. If I plug in x is 1, that will be 5. Now let's plug in 3, which means after 3 weeks, he'll have $11. And after 4 weeks, $14. So I know he's adding to his money $3 every week, so that's how it's constantly changing. That's why it's my slope. I know he started with 2. That's my starting point, my y-intercept. Okay, so we're going to use the same example on this next part over here. And it wants me to find the rate of change. So I'm going to teach you how to find the rate of change by taking 2 points. So we're going to go over here and take the 2 points. It does not matter. I'm going to take these first 2 points. So 0, 2, 1, 5. At the top, I'm also going to write the equation just so we have it when we get to this in a second, the graph. Okay, so we know x always comes first, y comes second. X comes first, y comes second. Okay, so this is how you calculate your rate of change, your slope, okay? So you take your 2 points. Remember, it's the change in y's over the change in x. Well, we know change, the change in something is the difference between something. So I'm going to start with a fraction bar with the minus sign on top and bottom. One trick that I like to tell my kids is that y's rise. It kind of rhymes, so it'll help you remember. Y's rise. So from my point, I want to take the y value and put it on top because the y rises and its x will go directly below it. So notice 2 on top, 0 below it. All right, we already had a minus sign there. All right, so now we're going to take our second point and its y will rise. So 5 on top, its x drops below it. So from here, so people, I don't like students to make mistakes. So I tell them to type this exactly into the calculator by pressing Control Divide. 2 minus 5 on top, 0 minus 1 on bottom. 3. Well, that should make sense because we already discovered earlier that the slope was 3. But this is how you calculate it by hand. All right, let's graph it. We said earlier that this was our y-intercept. So I'm going to go on the y-axis and I'm going to go put a dot at 2. Okay, so another way you could think of a slope is rise over run. So I'm going to turn this 3 into a fraction. 3 as a fraction is just 3 over 1. So I know it's going to rise, and this is how much it's going to run. Rise over run. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to rise 3. 1, 2, 3, run 1. Let's do it again. Rise 3, run 1. Rise 3, run 1. I know I want to stop my graph right here because this is talking about money, right? And money and time, neither money nor time can go in the negative direction. So my money started at 2, and it's going to go up by 3 each week that he saves. All right, so find the rate of change. This time it doesn't give me the story, so I can't just pick out the slope right away. So let's label this as slope. All right, so we picked 2 points. It doesn't matter which 2. Let's take the top 2. So I'm going to write them down. This is my x, this is my y. This is x, this is y. Remember, slope is the change in y over the change in x. Change means the difference, so I start with the fraction bar with a minus on top and on bottom. Okay, y's rise, so I'm going to take the first point. This y will go on top. So the y rises, its x drops right below it. All right, so behind your minus signs comes from the second point. We know the y rises, and its x will drop right below it. So the y is on top, its x drops below it. All right, so I'm going to type that in my calculator exactly as I see it because I don't want to make any silly mistakes. Come on, focus. So on top we had 0 minus 2. On the bottom we had a negative 4 minus 0. And you'll notice it comes out to be a positive 1/2. So since it's already a fraction, we know slope is also rise over run. So I know it will rise 1, run 2. Okay, we're going to use this on the continued example. Okay, so we already figured out slope. We have not figured out b, our y-intercept, so I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. The first way I'm going to show you is the hard way. Okay, so we already know that m is 1/2. Okay, we just calculated that our slope was 1/2. So what we need to find is b. So in order to find b, I need to plug in a value for x and y. So if you look at your table, on this last example, you had a ton of x's and y's. All you have to pick is 1. So let's pick this first one, negative 4, 0. This is an x, this is a y. So we're going to plug in, instead of y, I'll plug in 0 equals, so y equals, my slope we already discovered was 1/2. X, we're going to use x from a point which is negative 4 plus b. Okay, so we're going to solve for b. So 0 equals 1/2 times negative 4 is negative 2 plus b. Then what I need to do is get rid of this negative 2 by adding 2 to both sides. 0 plus 2 is 2. So I know b equals 2. So if I wanted to write my equation, it's going to be y equals m, our slope was 1/2, 1/2 x. My y-intercept is a positive 2. Y equals our slope, x, and then your y-intercept. Okay, another way we could have figured that out, the really easy way, which sometimes works out, is go look at your table. Your y-intercept is the y value when x is 0. Well, right here, I already have x is 0 listed here. So when x is 0, we started at a y of 2. So you really didn't have to do all that work, but I wanted to show you both ways. So remember, your y-intercept is the y value when the x is 0. Notice this is 2. And we solve to find 2. All right, so let's graph it. Our y-intercept right here we got as a positive 2. So on the y-axis, I'm going to go up 1, 2, put a dot. Okay, our slope is 1/2, so I'm going to rise 1, run 2. Do it again. Rise 1, run 2. So up 1 over 2. Okay, so this problem didn't have a story that went along with it, so there's nothing stopping it. So what I'm going to do is just use this extra sheet of paper as a straight edge. And to draw my line all the way across. Okay, so on this one I didn't have a story, so I don't know if negatives are possible or not. So I could draw it all the way across. Remember on the last one we were talking about time and money. Time isn't negative, money isn't negative, so I know I had to stop. Okay, so find rate of change. So far to find rate of change, we've taken 2 points off of our table. Well, we don't have a table, so what I'm going to do is find 2 good points from this graph, and I'm going to write them down. So let's see. Here's a good point. This point is located at 0, -2. Because it did not move on the x-axis, but it moved down 2 on the y-axis. Let's pick this one. It moved over 1 on the x-axis, and it moved down 5. That's -5. That's my x, that's my y. So it's the change in y's over the change in x's. So we start with our fraction bar, change means subtraction. Y's rise, so start with your first point. This y of -2 will rise on top. Its x would drop right below it. Your y rises, so that -5 goes on top. That 1 will drop right below it. Okay, notice we already had a minus here, right? So that's minus a negative, all right? So we have to make sure we type that into the calculator correctly. So when I type it in, you press Control Divide. We had -2 minus a -5. Type it in exactly as we wrote it. On bottom, 0 minus 1. So our slope is a -3. Notice, -3 as a fraction is -3 over 1, right? So it's rise over run. So instead of going up, because it's a -3, they went down 3 over 1. Down 3 over 1. So if it's ever a negative slope, you don't go up, you just go down. So -3, so they went down 1, 2, 3 over 1. Down 3 over 1. Okay, let's continue. We're going to write the equation. All right, we already found our m is -3. Okay, we're going to do it the hard way again too, just because we need practice at it, because sometimes you can't do it the easy way. So we have to pick a point to plug in for y and x so we can solve for this b. All right, so pick a point, same point we use for slope. So how about we use 0, -2, okay? Doesn't matter which point you use, as long as you use one point off the graph. Okay, so instead of y equals, I'm going to put -2 equals. So y equals, our m we said was -3, x is 0 plus b. So now we solve. -2 equals, that's going to give me 0 plus b. 0 plus b is just b, so I know b equals -2. So my equation is y equals m, our slope is -3x, so y equals mx. Our b is a -2, so I'm going to put -2. All right, so that was the hard way, right? You had to take a point, plug in for the y, m, and the x. Or you could have just looked at the graph, right, from the very beginning. Y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. Well, here's the y-axis. This is where it crosses. It's down 1, 2. Okay, so you can fill out your table by either looking at your graph or, since we have an equation now, oops, sorry guys, I can't even see. So we could fill out the table by flipping back and forth and looking at the graph on the other page and filling these values in. Or we could graph it since we have the equation in our calculator and open our table. So it's negative 3x minus 2, right? Yep. All right, I'm going to press Control T to open my table. Okay, x is the skinny column, so I'm going to go find negative 3 and negative 2. So 7 and 4. Can y'all see that? There we go. So when x is negative 3, it's 7. When x is negative 2, the y is 4. All right, so this is my y. So y is the fat column, so I'm going to go find negative 2, negative 5, and negative 8. Well, I see negative 2 is right here. Negative 5. Negative 8 is 2. Okay, let's go back to what I said about the y-intercept. Remember our y-intercept is negative 2? Earlier I told you the y-intercept is the y value when x is 0. So that should also make sense. So that's your y-intercept. It's the y value when x is 0. Okay, I made a mistake on this one, guys, and I printed copies before. So right here on the problem it says weeks t. I want you to change t to x and change t right here to x as well, because if you notice in your equation there is no t's. So change both of those to x's. Okay, so we're trying to figure out which of these equations match this table. Okay, so you can do this several ways. All right, so let's read it. The dog is overweight. He gets put on a diet. The table below shows the dog's weight, W, as a function of time in weeks, X. Which equation best fits this data? So 1, we know this is X, so I could plug in a 1 for each one of these equations and figure out which one has an output, the W, of 95. You always want to check at least 2, guys. Never check the first one because they try to trick you. Okay, so always check at least 2 of your X's and make sure they match. Or what you could do is you could graph, right? So I could graph, excuse me, 3x plus 98. So answer choice 1 is, there we go, 3x plus 98. That's a table, so I'm going to open the table. All right, so we want 1 and 95. Boom, right away. I know that does not match. This one says 1 and 101. So I know it can't be A. Okay, I'm going to press my table by pressing Control T. All right, so instead of just typing it in all over again, I'm just going to change what I had already typed in. You can do this by pressing Tab. If you press Tab, this box pops up. I'm going to press up, and I can get back to what I typed in originally. Focus. Okay, so that says 3x plus 98. Let's try C, which is next. So that's negative 3x plus 98. Control T. All right, so we want 1 and 95, that matches. 2 and 92, that matches. 3 and 89, perfect. All right, so we know that C does match. So you could graph a table, or, like I said, you could plug in. And let's do that. Negative 3, focus. Negative 3 times our first x is 1, plus 98 equals 95, which is what we wanted. Or negative 3 times our second x, which is 2, plus 98, 92. So either way. Okay, on this one, I want you to try to get this one on your own. Remember, y equals mx plus b. This is your slope. Slope is rate of change. This is your y-intercept, aka your starting point. All right, so I want you to read that problem and try to pick the correct answer.